I want to talk about a book today that often inspires very long videos and reviews and discussions, in particular from booktubers, but also other readers from throughout history. And the book is Middlemarch, and I think the reason that it inspires such long, in-depth discussions are for very good reasons, because it is a very long novel for one, but it also has a lot of characters. It has very ambitious, lofty themes, so there's a lot to talk about with it. But I want to take a bit of a different approach and try to say in as short a space as I can why I really love this novel. And I did love it. I'm not holding you in any kind of suspense. I really, really liked it. And I don't want to start where a lot of people start with the Middlemarch, with a summary of the plot, because I think summarizing the plot of this book sort of minimizes it and probably does it a bit of a disservice, because if you were to look at what happens in this book, the events of the plot on paper, it would look pretty dull. And I do think that in the hands of a different writer, this novel could have just been horribly dull. But in the hands of George Eliot, this great writer, it is magnificent. It really is kind of like one of those big, ambitious Russian novels by like Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, but written by an English author with an English sensibility. And I think that that's part of why I loved it, because I love big, ambitious novels, and I also really like Russian writers. But it's really the writing behind it that makes the story magnificent, although it is also a very well-executed story. But so the first thing that I loved about this novel was the compassion of George Eliot. She approaches every single character with sympathy, even the characters who are not particularly likable, and even the ones who are morally reprehensible. One in particular who does something morally reprehensible in this novel, she makes you sympathize with him. And the reason that she is able to do that, even with her characters that are just clearly horrible, and which no one in the novel even likes, is because she has such a sharp psychological insight into how people tick. She's so good at kind of working out the mental acrobatics that people have to go through to justify their actions to themselves. And I think that when you experience that on the page, as George Eliot writes about it, when you hear all of that analysis, it's really difficult not to start sort of feeling sympathy for them, because I think when you know anyone's background and story in all its complexity, it's difficult not to sympathize with them. At least it is for me, because I'm kind of an empath who empathizes very easily. But I think when you know someone's story, it's really difficult to hate them completely. And that was something that I loved, was just that she approaches everyone with compassion, including, and perhaps most of all, the people who deserve it the least, but perhaps need it the most, to paraphrase a quote from a great documentary. So all of the characters in this book are flawed in some way. Not all of them are as bad as Mr. Bulstrode, who is the morally reprehensible character I mentioned, but all of them are flawed in some way. And even Dorothea Brooke and Tertius Lydgate, who are kind of the two protagonists, if there are two protagonists in this novel, are both on paper good people who want to do good things. Dorothea Brooke wants to do charity, wants to bring comfort to people, and also she marries this man named Edward Casaubon, who is much older than her and is working on this scholarly work called the Key to All Mythologies, which is supposed to connect all the mythologies of the world together. And she thinks that through marrying him, she can help him with that, and then sort of bring great good to the world through that scholarly work. Tertius Lydgate is a doctor who hopes to hopes to do experiments and have a great medical breakthrough that will bring a lot of good to the world. But with both of them, you kind of realize that Dorothea is kind of pompous and full of herself. Lydgate is extremely selfish, and in both cases, their desire to help people comes from a kind of egoistic place. You know, Dorothea sort of wants to be a new Saint Teresa in a way, and so you can see that part of why she wants to help people is sort of selfish. And same thing with Lydgate. He talks all about how he's going to be this famous doctor after he helps all these people. And again, so their desire to help people is coming from this sort of selfish place. But nonetheless, they want to do good, and George Eliot endears them to you with her writing, as she does with Mr. Bulstrode. And something that I thought was really interesting in that whole theme of wanting to do good coming from a place of selfishness was that it's sort of contrasted with Rosamund Vincy, who is Tertius Lydgate's wife, who is really materialistic and superficial and also incredibly selfish. But basically, she just wants nice things in her life. That's why she marries Lydgate. She thinks he's going to make money and be able to give her nice things. And at first glance, you would think that she and Lydgate and Dorothea were complete opposites, but you realize with time that they are kind of two sides of the same coin, because their desires in life come from a very similar place, even though they manifest very differently. But even Rosamond, who is, again, I said, is a very irritating character, you, I think, end up sympathizing with, especially since she does grow in the novel. She is probably the character who goes through the most growth in the novel, and so I think you do end up sympathizing with her as well. And what Dorothea and Lydgate also learn is that you don't need these lofty ambitions about how you're going to help so many people in the world to be good and to do good. What makes the world tick and what lets people live their lives well is just everyday acts of compassion, which we see at various points in this novel, and I think it's kind of the main theme of the novel, as encapsulated in the final quote, which I will read to you. "For the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts, and that things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been is half owing to the number who lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs." And that is one of my favorite quotes of all time, and it is also extremely indicative of the other major aspect of this novel that I just loved, which was the writing. As you can probably see from that quote, is written at times in a very lofty style. Georgia Eliot kind of has a few different registers, it seems to me. Sometimes she can be very aphoristic, sometimes she can be a lot more long-winded, and then sometimes she can be incredibly flowery and grandiose, as she was in that final quote. But sometimes there are just moments of lyrical beauty like this one, which I'm going to read to you. And there's no sort of spoiler in this quote, it's just a description of a scene. "She opened her curtains and looked out towards the bit of road that lay in view, with fields beyond, outside the entrance gates. On the road there was a man with a bundle on his back and a woman carrying a baby. In the field she could see figures moving, perhaps the shepherd with his dog. Far off in the bending sky was the pearly light, and she felt the largeness of the world and the manifold wakings of men to labor and endurance. She was a part of that involuntary, palpitating life, and could neither look out on it from her luxurious shelter as a mere spectator, nor hide her eyes in selfish complaining." And that is probably my favorite passage, and what I was thinking about the writing as I read the book, and may sound a bit pompous, but what I was thinking about the writing has this epic register to it that it is reminiscent of kind of an epic poem, or even perhaps of Moby Dick, like Herman Melville's writing in a Moby Dick. That really elevates the story. But what I was thinking while throughout reading this book was that the writing, these sort of asides that she has, like the one that I just read, like the others where she's analyzing the psychology behind these characters, act in a way like sort of arias in an opera, you know, because in an opera you have the action that's happening, but then you'll have moments where the action stops and a character just sings about their feelings, you know, and opera is known for having not always the greatest stories. Sometimes they're melodramatic, sometimes they make no sense, but you get involved in them anyway because of how great the music is. You know, when a heroine is standing on a stage singing her heart out and singing a great aria, I think that what opera does is it makes you care about them anyway just because of how great the music is and ideally good acting and so on. But the writing acts in that similar way where, like I said, the story of this book on paper would not seem very remarkable, but because of the writing, you care so much about it, and you see why it actually is a profound story in the hands of George Eliot. And that's what I thought was so brilliant about Middlemarch. So anyway, I hope that this video made sense, and I hope you got some enjoyment out of it. If you have read this book, whether you've liked it or not, leave a comment, because I would love to discuss this. If you haven't read it and want to read it, let me know, because yeah, I would love to hear what you think of it. But anyway, I will let you all go and talk to you later. Bye.